All right, it's time for the paper review now. Let's see what the headlines are this morning. And I have with me on Skype lawyer and social development advocate Jide Olokun. Jide, good morning. It's good to have you join me right now. I hope you're keeping safe where you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. Now let's begin with the Leadership newspaper this morning. Leadership newspaper, it says the federal government steps up COVID-19 fight to build isolation testing centers in 36 states and waives import duty for medical supplies. You find all that on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. Then let's go to the national economy. The national economy says federal government projects economy to contract by 3.4%, MOL's $20 per barrel budget benchmark. And Brent crude climbs above $30 per barrel. And NESG urges diversification of economy from over-reliance on oil. And Pengasan threatened strike over looming workers' sack. All right, that's what you see on the National Economy newspaper. News Direct is the next one we're looking at right now. Post-COVID-19 lockdown, customers storm commercial banks over cash crisis. That's what News Direct has. Customer storm. Okay. No, the current one now says the infectious disease control bill, reps threaten legal action over $10 billion bribery allegation on the News Direct. The Daily Times is next now. Daily Times is on COVID-19. It says federal government to further slash oil price to $20 per barrel. And as Buhari okays import duty waivers for pharmaceuticals and medical equipment, waivers must be temporal to avoid rendering local pharmaceutical firms useless. May Lafia is saying that, adding that to the issue there. That's Daily Times. Let's go to Daily Trust now. Daily Trust says dozens die in Jigawa in 4 days. Residents count 110 bodies, and we recorded 13 deaths in our facility. CMD saying that COVID-19 not responsible. Council chair is saying that we're investigating causes. The state government is saying this. All right, that's what you see on the front page of Daily Trust. And I think let's look at it from, let's look at the issues there right now. Jide, if you see the headline on the Daily Trust, like it seems another state is witnessing some kind of mysterious deaths like Kano, and we're talking about Jigawa State here right now. I wonder what you make of the community infections that are going on and unexplained deaths, mass deaths that we are recording in some of the states in the northern part of the country.
Thank you, Mike. It's quite disturbing. As of today, we have about 148 new cases, bringing us to a total of about 2,950. And you know, what started with an index case, and we can see how it's spreading. And right now we are dealing with the community spread. And with the one thing I've just noticed is that it could have been better if the states acknowledged and admitted immediately that these mysterious deaths in quotes were connected to COVID-19. But having said that also, it has also revealed the unpreparedness of the nation to combat the COVID-19 crisis, in the sense that as we speak now, Kano State is still battling to put the adequate healthcare facility in place, also in some other states, Jigawa and Co. And if you look at the social fabric of some of these regions, it's been difficult to contain the spread, because even when some prominent ones are buried, we have seen reports of how they did not respect the social distance requirement. So now we have a case of, orientation combined with a health situation that is plaguing us. And I just hope that Nigeria will seize this brilliant opportunity to start reinvesting in the health sector, because whether we like it or not, health is crucial as an amenity in any society. And here we are now. The government is overwhelmed. But interestingly, we are beginning to have some funds come into the country, like the Abacha loot that has just been returned, the $3.4 million from IMF, and the donations from some well-meaning Nigerians, corporate and individual, to managing this COVID-19. If we conscientiously invest them into developing the healthcare, that will not only help us successfully manage COVID-19 crisis, but help us sustain a very vibrant health sector in the nation. Because like the wise people say, health is sector. So I just hope and pray that this will be a deciding moment for Nigeria. And for the families of the victims of COVID-19, I express my condolence. And right now, I feel for the nation because it's not easy. Like I said, this case started like a joke. And here we are now. The case is spreading. And if you look at the socio-economic implication also, the fact that we have not succeeded in facilitating an effective lockdown is making it worse, because even in the southern part of the country, where people have been allowed to step out for a while, for instance, to engage their businesses, you can see the reports we are getting. We have clusters of people here and there, sometimes even fighting and really rubbing on one another. So, and we thank God for those who are respecting the directive on face masks, but then we have not recorded about 80% of compliance. So by and large, COVID-19 is one of the several crises that has visited the world. But in comparison, I believe that we look at developed countries who have developed structures. And in this case, I'm advising my great nation to look in the direction of Germany. Germany has the facilities, and like I keep saying, we thank God for the grace that has not thrown us into a pandemic, because right now it's like we are even still handling the epidemic level of COVID-19. And
all right. But Jide, yes. Yeah, Jide, the point there is the headline that says the residents count about 140 bodies. If that number is anything to go by, then it draws us closer to the similarity of what happened in Kano. Now, for other states that are neighboring to all of these states, like Katsina, for instance, Gombe, for instance, Yobe, on the other hand, Kebbi and Zamfara state, that are all in that axis, what kind of precautions should they be taking right now when it comes to taking urgent and drastic measures to ensure that this doesn't happen or continue to spread?
The major precaution I believe has been taken, which is the interstate movement lockdown. But is it respected? And that has to do with the system we run. Some of these directives are compromised. So you find people smuggling themselves into states, and you also find, rather than collaborating at this point in time to contain the infections at the local level, talking about states now, some states are even repatriating Almanjiris back to their states of origin. And some of them have tested positive to COVID-19. So you see this economic and social crisis now coming to the fore. And by the way, do we even have the facilities? Let's even assume now that we want to quarantine those who have tested positive. Do we have the facility? And the answer is no. So we have a huge problem here. So while we are battling to manage this crisis at the instant point now, we should be looking at the long-term range. Let me ask this simple question. Will it make a difference if, for example, we already had 36 intensive unit care facility in the 36 states of the country and in Abuja? It's now a matter of expanding capacity, but we don't even have that capacity. It is when you have it that you are now saying you are expanding. And I like to make reference. It is disturbing, and it should not be allowed to be repeated, that the chief of staff to the president of my great nation could not be treated in the Federal Capital Territory. That tells a lot, my brother. And that is why we need to wake up now. We pray that we don't find ourselves in a pandemic, but here the fire is spreading, and I am just advising that all the resources that are available now should not be channeled into the funnel of corruption, because we have a sustained corruption in the country. Right now, we are beginning to talk about probing those who are handing this money. So we need to get serious as a nation and realize that the wealth of a nation is measured by the wealth of the people. You need to secure the people. And I like to go back to the primary purpose of government, which is the security and the welfare of the people. And you can find that in section 14, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended. So
All right.
I wish our government the best, and I appeal to the people, please, let's stay alive. It is a man who is alive that will begin to deal with
All right.
business.
Thank you so much, Jide, for your time on the program. We really appreciate you for your contribution there. All right, it's time for paper review now. Let's get into the headlines and see what we have on the papers across Nigeria this morning. I will have with me, joining me on Skype, lawyer and social development advocate Jide Ologun. Jide, it's good to have you join me right now on the paper review. Let's see what the headlines have this morning for us. Let's see. We will start with the Leadership newspaper. Leadership this morning says that federal government sets up COVID-19 fight to build isolation testing centers in 36 states, waive import duty for medical supplies, uses remdesivir to manage coronavirus patients, and upgrades Kano testing capacity to 2,000 daily as one doctor dies. 32 others test positive. The police set Emir of Daura's palace over masses gathering. Royal father hospitalized. Banks comply with PTF directive. Open more branches to customers. Lagos discharges 60 patients. These are all the headlines and sub-headlines you see on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. From there, let's go to the national economy. And national economy is saying federal government projects economy to contract by 3.4%, Moll's $20 per barrel budget benchmark, and that's the national economy. And he said Brent crude climbs above $30 per barrel, and the NESG urges diversification of economy from over-reliance on oil. And Pengasan threatened strike over looming workers' strike, or sack rather. All right, you see that on the front page of the national economy. News Direct is next now. News Direct. Okay, News Direct says infectious disease control bill, reps threaten legal action over $10 billion bribery allegation. That's a News Direct. And Daily Times is next, and it focuses on COVID-19. Federal government to further slash oil price to $20 per barrel. That's based on the benchmark of the budget for the year 2020. And as Buhari okays import duty waivers for pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, waivers must be temporal to avoid rendering local pharmaceutical firms useless. Obadiah Melafia is saying that. All right, that's the Daily Times. Daily Trust, on the other hand, says dozens die in Jigawa in 4 days. Residents count 140 bodies. We recovered 13 deaths in our facility. The CMD saying that, and COVID-19 not responsible council chair is saying this. We're investigating causes. The state government of Jigawa is revealing all of this. All right, Judy, let me bring you to the story on the national economy. The national economy says something really interesting here. Federal government projects economy to contract by 3.4%. Moll's $20 per barrel budget benchmark. Now, if you look at the story, there's also the call to diversify now. Some analysts have said, some experts have advised the government that if oil benchmark drops to anything within the region of $15, $16, or $17 per barrel, that Nigeria should stop oil production or oil exploration and delve into agriculture or solid minerals. What do you say of that?
Absolutely, I'm in agreement. And we need to realize that Nigeria is in the class of high cost of production oil producers in the world. Unlike the Russian, the Saudi Arabian, and the United States of American government that can probably, absorb the shock that we have now. And we know that the real benchmark for the 2020 budget was about $57 per barrel. And even at a point in time, this price crashed to about $1, and that is a huge one for us. I've even read about the GMD of NNPC warning that if it crashes to a ridiculous rate, that we may have to stop producing. And this is the time for a huge lesson. This is time you look back and ask the big question, what have we done with the oil windfall we have enjoyed? Recall that Nigeria discovered oil in commercial quantity in 1956, and we joined the League of Producers in 1958. And the first refinery in this country was commissioned in 1965. And we have 4 refineries that over the years have become moribund. And do you know that in the early 70s, we recorded an oil boom, the windfall. And of course, we diverted it to pleasure. That was when the Udoji bonus was released to the country, while some other countries were busy using their oil wealth to develop capacity for sustainable development. Because there are several levels of wealth. You talk about the primary wealth, which, for instance, now are the resources we have in the country. And you talk about upgrading them to principal wealth that can keep generating wealth and wealth, like when you develop your infrastructure, when you develop your economy. And now that we are beginning to talk about diversification, agriculture alone may not be able to sustain us. I think in 1960 rather, the population of Nigeria was about 45 million. Today we're about 200 million. So how far will agriculture go? And even the agriculture we are talking about, we have diversified in theory, but we have the insecurity challenge where herdsmen go and kill farmers, where they produce from the farm. We don't even have storage facility. But what are we advised at this point? Is what China did at the entry point of industrialization. Can we fix our electricity and let the private sector key into this available electricity to jumpstart the economy? They can provide jobs. What has happened to the textile industries that we used to boast of in Nigeria? What has, and now you can hear those who are running their businesses at the port complaining. One thing that Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore was to put in place an effective bureaucracy. We refer to it as the ease of doing business. What is the ease of doing business in Nigeria? So if you are going to diversify the economy, you must make the business environment friendly and let people invest. And we can provide jobs and start settling all these crises that we have and block all the loopholes. As we speak now, we still talk about oil theft. Do you know, and we have been mentioning it, that in Zamfara State alone, the gold deposit in Zamfara State can earn that state about $2 billion annually. You can imagine bringing that in. You can imagine the heavy food potentials in the middle belt of this nation. You can imagine that Professor Benedict Ayade is inviting the federal government, inviting the world to pay attention to the agro-revolution going on in Cross River State, where we can produce food. He is constructing, a super highway to connect the north with the sea port in Calabar. He's constructing the rice mill in Ogoja that will produce vitamized rice, the first of its kind in Africa. So this is the time to look inwards. But for me, beyond agriculture, or permit me to say, in addition to diversifying into agriculture, we need to empower the economic environment through electricity. And what will it take us? As we dialogue now, I know that my country has sustained the supply of electricity to Niger Republic, Benin Republic, and probably Togo. How have we succeeded in doing that? And in addition to that, do you know that these 3 nations I mentioned are owing Nigeria about 30 billion naira from the electricity we are supplied to them? So let's get serious. make the business environment friendly, then provide the basic amenities that will revive the economy of Nigeria. Somebody said that if we have maximized even 20% of what we have derived from the oil and gas of this nation, that Nigeria should be about the third capital of prosperity in the world.
All right,
But let me
Jide.
ask you a question,
Yes.
okay?
Now, Jide, the NBS came up with a report which certainly says that about 82.9 million Nigerians live below the poverty line. And certainly that is a very scary one. And according to the World Poverty Clock, they're saying that by 2050, if nothing is done, the Nigerian poverty index would have risen to, or poverty population would have risen to 110 million people, which is above the 50% of its population. Now, how scary are these? If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals benchmark that we're supposed to even reach by 2030, what are the parameters and what are you seeing? What projections do you see, and how positive is it?
Mr. Mike, the Chinese say the best time to have planted a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. If my nation repents and begin to be sincere with the management of our resources, we can get out of poverty. And at that point, I'm not scared. But if we continue with the mismanagement of the resources of this nation, we can only plunge into further crisis. Now, the National Bureau of Statistics came up with about 87 point something. But the United Nations already came out with about half of the population of Nigeria being within the poverty bracket. In fact, the presidency admitted it by promising to lift 100 million Nigeria out of poverty in 10 years. What are we talking about? Do we have any business being in poverty? But I think we have deliberately created poverty in this nation. It's on record that Singapore was pushed out of Malaysia in 1965 and fell under the leadership of Lee Kuan Yew. And between that moment and now that we speak, Singapore emanated from a little fishing community with little resources to being the greatest success story amongst the 4 Asian tigers, or they call them dragons, if you choose, because that leader maximized their resources. It brought about, pragmatic leadership. But here we are. Have we even been able to render account of what we have generated as a nation from oil and gas, different kinds of scam? All right, so if we get serious, sir, we can come out of poverty. And I hope that this COVID-19 experience will be the jump starter of moving in the direction of prosperity, because poverty is a threat to everyone. And that is why we are advising that it's either the present leadership we restructure their governance mindset, or somehow a new leadership emerges that will take Nigeria to the deserved platform of
promised land. Thank you so much, Jide Ologun, for your time on the program. Thank you very much.